Well, Charlie, thank you for coming in here on a Monday morning, a dreary Monday morning, no less, to come in and hang out with us here in the community clubhouse at Truist Park for a little bit. Good to see you here. How's life right now? What are you up to these days?
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Yeah, a little dreary. I mean, it's been so cold, and then you go outside today, and it's super misty and it's still cold.
Yeah.
I think it's the longest cold spell we've had in Atlanta in a while. But no, things are great. I'm married to my wife Sarah. We have 3 children. Just trying to stay healthy. That's the biggest thing for us is just staying healthy, keeping the kids in school. But I enjoyed being at home last year after I unfortunately got released again by the Braves in March. But as a pitcher, and once that happened, I knew that I was done. I was done playing. I was done grinding and trying to keep my career going. But I was able to enjoy being at home with my family, going to all the sporting events, activities, school activities, and that was a blast. Now I got in with Braves alumni and Greg McMichael and Doug over here, and they've allowed me to be a part of the alumni family. I was able to go down and help out and coach at Braves fantasy camp this year, and that was a blast. Just a great time to be with all the guys, a lot of the fans of the game, of the Braves, and it just made baseball seem fun. They made it fun, and I was just a little part of that, being able to coach and develop these great friendships in such a short time. So I really had a lot of fun with that. And now trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. I've been thinking about it the last 2 or 3 months. Kind of hard, but I'm going to try to get into radio and potentially broadcasting.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so just trying to be open to everything, which will allow me to still be at home, some with my family. But Dad needs to be out doing something as well. And, being a utility baseball player up and down in the major leagues for a long time, I learned how to grind and I learned how to be away. But I want to show my kids and everybody else that Dad can still do it and Dad can still work hard and still be successful at something else besides being a baseball player.
I think when we had C.J. Nitkowski on when he first got hired on by the Braves about a year ago, right at a year ago now,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember him kind of talking about that. I don't know how much. Actually, I don't even know how much he talked about it, but I know in getting to know him a little bit since then and watching him, like the guy was in the big leagues for a long time, but he grinds as hard now as anybody else I know. And then Ben Ingram on the radio side is one of my close friends, and he's in the big chair now, but I see and know how much preparation and how much work he puts into that every day, and that there's still a grind to that. So I love that. I think I love that approach. I know in talking with Greg McMichael, I know he advises a lot of guys once they hang them up. I think he tells people, give it a year if you can. Not everybody can do that, but if you can give yourself a year to kind of be at home, be with the family, and then start to prioritize and figure out what you want to do. I think that's such a healthy way to look at it. And that sounds like that's what you've had. You've had some time to kind of sit back and figure out the next steps.
Yeah, and I think the time has been a great thing for me. Going into the 2024 season, I made the decision to try pitching because at the end of that year, I was pitching in Gwinnett, and it was such a blast and something new for me and a new challenge. But I gave it a shot to get through to spring training last year and hopefully make a team and go pitch somewhere and see where that, leads me. But being released at the end of March as a pitcher kind of made it a little bit tougher to potentially try to continue something in baseball last year. But it also gave me extra time to be at home, to do things with my family, to see other family and friends as well. And so I think it was a blessing to have had that extra time, another full season at home. That way I didn't have to really jump into something. But I tell you, it's a lot of fun to be at home and to spend that time there. But I felt like I was busier not being a baseball player than when I was playing. But I'm also looking forward to this next chapter and to grinding it again. I know I don't take things lightly. I don't think I'm just going to jump into something and be the best at it. But I know back to my playing days and back to working really hard and preparing, I know when I did that and I did that to the best of my ability, I feel like it showed up. And when I did skip out on things, it wasn't often, but you expect to succeed when you're not doing all the things that you should be doing. That's not a good recipe. So I'm looking forward to getting back into a grind mentality to hopefully show up when it matters the most.
Absolutely. I do want to get to your kind of early life and go through your career a little bit, but I did want to ask a little bit about fantasy camp real quick. So Greg took me down there for the first time, I think, 5 years ago. Yeah, it was 2020, early 2020. This year is the first year I haven't gone since then because we've got a little one at home, so I didn't want to be away from her just yet. But being in fantasy camp, I didn't know what to expect. He brought me down there so we could do this show. We wanted to tape an episode or two down there and do some social media stuff, which is what Victoria and I do for the Braves. And I went down there and I was blown away by just how much fun it was. And I think you nailed it perfectly. It's the folks that are down there, and a lot of them come back every year. It's all these grown men and women, but they're playing this game and it's like kids. It's like watching kids play the game, just have fun for the love of it. And they have such a good time with each other, and they develop such a bond and camaraderie. So just what were you expecting when you went down there, or did you have any expectations, and what did anything surprise you about it?
Yeah, honestly, I didn't really know what to expect. It was actually the first time that I was going to be back at the park since I was released. So there was that in the back of my mind to think I'm going to be walking back into a facility where my baseball career, officially ended. But I was kind of over that as well. But it was in the back of my mind. But then you get to the park and you see all these guys that were there. I mean, they're paying to come play baseball. But the funny thing is, and I was thinking about it, these guys don't have to worry about getting released. They don't have to worry about getting sent down. They have to worry about getting hurt.
Yeah.
But we have a great training staff there to help them. But to see the joy that every person brings, and then being with the alumni, being in a locker room with Denny Nagel, who's a trip, Steve Avery, and then Mike Hampton was my pitching coach on my team, Julio Franco with his first year being down as a alumni coach, Pete Smith, Mike Bilecki, Mark Wohlers. I rode in with him and Mike Mordecai from the airport. I'm riding from the airport with these guys, and the conversations were great. And, they're former baseball players, but, obviously everybody's just a normal guy. So all those guys just made me feel super welcomed. And to see how everyone just kind of hung out and talked, and with Kangaroo Court, with the dinners at night, with the practices, the extra hitting in the cages, I felt there was no pressure. I knew it was fantasy camp. These guys are, wanting to win, wanting to work hard, but to see how much everybody just hung out and had a great time, it definitely made baseball that much more fun from the coaching side.
I'm sure. I love the banter between the campers and the coaches. And the coaches, all the alumni that are just giving each other a hard time. You mentioned Avery and Mike Mordecai, and Denny. Denny got me good on a couple pranks when I was down there. I was walking behind him out of the cafeteria, and he got me hook, line, and sinker. I thought he had somehow bashed his head into the door, and he just did it like an actor. And I was like, oh man, he just hurt himself. And then he just got this big grin on his face. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right, he got me.
Yeah. You could tell he's just loud and making noises and
all the time.
I'm like, as a player, you hear of, the guys that played before you, but to see them in person and to get to know them, and don't want to leave out Johnny Estrada and Matt Diaz and Sid Bream, but everybody was just great. And even when you get a little bit older, they're still jokesters. They had a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Well, let's back up. So let's get to, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your early life and early childhood baseball life. So born in Rome, right? Mm-hmm. Rome, Georgia. I didn't know this. So I was a fan of yours, worked with the Braves, but I also still a Braves fan, like a fan of yours and your career. I didn't know till I was reading up on you that your dad actually was drafted or signed by the Giants, played in the minors. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now when you were born, had he already hung him up by that point, or was there some overlap there?
Yeah, he had just finished playing, but he coached 2 years in the White Sox organization. So it's kind of weird. We have a picture with me and my dad in Birmingham when he was a hitting coach there one season. And I think I was like 2 maybe. But for some reason, I feel like I still remember running out on the field and taking a picture with him. And we have that picture. My parents had that at their house. It might just be something that I see the picture and I feel like I was there or I remember it, but I do somewhat remember that moment of him coaching. But it was cool that he was drafted by the Giants in '84. I was originally drafted by the San Francisco Giants in 2007. So to have that with me and my dad was pretty awesome and special.
That's cool. I firmly believe that you do have that memory, because I think that there's certain, like my first memories are something involving like something important that my dad did. And those are my first memories in life.
Right.
So I very much believe that. And I don't know that the age matters much. I think somehow I'm not a scientist, and my grades in school would very clearly illustrate that. But I very much believe in that. So, so you were around the game then, literally from the get-go. And did you love it from the very beginning? Always wanted to be a baseball player?
Yeah, I feel like I kind of had to. I grew up in it. My dad was and still is a youth coach. He gives private instruction in Rome. He has youth teams. And when I was 5, I think I was 6 years old, just turned 6, he helped start a batting facility in Rome, Georgia. And so 30 years later, he's still doing it. So I was always at the cages when we had tokens to put them in the machines. The owner, who's a really good family friend of mine and our family, would always joke with me and still jokes with me to the day. He's like, when we'd have customers come in to purchase tokens, they didn't have any left. Well, I also remember having my pockets filled with these gold tokens at the strike zone in Rome, Georgia, and I would just hit all day. And so whenever I didn't have a practice or playing another sport, I was at the cages with my dad when he was doing lessons, and until my mom got off work, I would just go in there and hit. And so it was a thing that I loved to do. And obviously a lot of us kids, we look up to our mom and dad, and I looked up to my dad because former professional baseball player, and I see, the work that he put into it and to put into these other young athletes growing up, wanting them to learn the game and to love the game as well. And he just instilled that in me at a young age.
Who was your big league team growing up? Because you're born here in Georgia, but then your dad was in different organizations in various capacities. So who was your team growing up? Yeah,
well, I think I enjoyed the Atlanta Braves. And during the time of the mid to late 90s, they were a blast to watch. Very easy to root for. Growing up an hour and a half away from Turner Field. And then my mom actually grew up in Seattle, Washington. And so I was a Mariners fan as well. So, I always say I had 3 kind of favorite players. It was Chipper here. Andrew was obviously a lot of fun to watch. And then for the Mariners, it was Ken Griffey Jr. and Alex Rodriguez. Those 2 guys were, 2 of the best players in baseball for a long time. And so I grew up a Mariners fan, American League, and Braves in the National League.
That works. Me growing up in the 90s, I grew up in Virginia, and it was pretty much you were a Braves fan, or in Virginia you'd have some Orioles fan. But everybody, regardless of how much whatever your team was, everybody loved Ken Griffey. That was just the time. He was just the man, and he was cool. He wore the hat backwards, and he was the best. So I can understand that. That's an easy one to understand.
Yeah, my dad always told me you never wear your hat backwards on the field, and it was a respect thing. But Ken Griffey Jr., he got a chance to play with his dad in the major leagues. So I feel like if you're that good, you had that swagger, and you're the best, I guess there's a few things that you can say, sure, you can do that. But that fit him. And it's still, when you think of Ken Griffey, you think of him taking BP on the field with his hat backwards. And to see other guys do that, I played with guys that did that. It was a little weird, especially playing for the Braves. You wear your hat forward.
Yeah.
You put your glasses on the back of your cap to keep the A showing. That was a Bobby Cox rule. And so there's just some things that, I just didn't feel like doing. And then as a little kid, when your dad said, don't wear your hat backwards, you don't wear your hat backwards on the field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to listen to that.
Yeah.
I learned that one too. So as you're playing growing up, when did it start to become apparent to you, like, hey, I think I could play professionally? Or when did that, I'm sure you always dreamed it, but then when does that dream start to kind of start to meet reality?
Yeah, I think it was probably my senior year in high school. There was talks with preseason rankings and this and that, but we also had 2 other guys in our high school team that were draft eligible, and 3 of us actually got drafted. One guy was Josh Smoker, who was the 31st overall pick by the Nationals. So he garnered a lot of attention early on in high school with his name and just his performances in summer ball. And then another good friend of mine, Brody Pullen, who actually just got married this past Saturday. So we were at his wedding. He was, I think, a 33rd rounder by the Reds. But Brody was probably the best talented athlete that I ever played with as a young kid. And then Josh was a guy that had an unbelievable sophomore year of high school. And so our senior year, we would have 50 to 60 scouts come to our games. And so with Josh being one of the top lefties in the high school draft, he brought a lot of guys in. And then I started being able to hit for teams before games. And I think my senior year is when it really hit me that, this could become reality. Being able to, I tell high school kids too how much fun obviously it is to play high school and how quick it goes, to enjoy it, because you have your school, then you have your team, and it's like you're playing for your high school team, and there's really nothing like it. I think times are changing a little bit with this NIL stuff, and potentially some high school kids getting paid to go to their school. Who knows? I'm not really sure. I haven't really looked into it. But you obviously were doing it for the love, for yourself, for your family, and for your teammates and for your school. So it was just such a great time that just goes by way too quick. But seeing all those scouts in the stands with their radar guns and their notepads writing things down made it that much more fun for me to potentially achieve the first part of your dream and a goal to get drafted. And so that kind of hit me my senior year of high school.
What was it like getting drafted? Was it just a joyous day?
It was. I mean, we were following on the computer. I think the first round, the first 30 picks were being televised. Maybe one of the first years that happened.
Yeah, it was around 2007 or so is when that started.
I think that was the first year. Then my pick was on the computer. It was the 51st pick. And so we had a couple friends over, and then, our family. It was pretty surreal. And then to be drafted by the Giants, a team that, my dad was drafted by. And it was crazy. One of my hitting coaches, I think it was my third full season in San Jose, his name was Gary Davenport. His dad was a longtime Giant in the 60s. Gary was my hitting coach, and his first job as a coach in the Giants organization, he was a hitting coach for my dad in Fresno, California. And so I think there was 26 years apart where he got to coach my dad and myself. So that was pretty cool. It was pretty awesome to see the connections there just in the Giants organization.
And then what was that grind like? Okay, you get drafted, part one of dream achieved, unlocked, but then the next step is I would assume I didn't do it, but he assumed even tougher. What was that like then? Okay, you're a professional now, trying to get from there all the way to the big leagues.
Yeah, I feel like with a lot of other guys that had I guess you were drafted a little bit higher, you had maybe a step up. But June 7th was the draft that year, and a week later on the 14th, I was flying to Arizona. And so Arizona, I've never been before. It was hot as can be. It's a dry heat, still hot. I remember taking all my stuff to a Days Inn hotel, walking to the back of the hotel thinking, what am I doing? I really thought that, and it was a dream of mine. I was super committed to baseball and to starting my journey to becoming a major leaguer. And I was thinking, dang, I'm not sure if I made the right idea, if I made the right choice. Like, getting drafted was great, but it's 108 degrees, and I'm all the way across the country. Didn't know when I was going to see my family again. It was tough. Walk into a room and eventually met a guy by the name of Nick Noonan, who was another high school draft out of San Diego. We became best friends, and he was in my wedding, and we still talk to this day. So it's just kind of crazy how that connection and becoming a friend so quick in that journey, the first day of being a professional, we kind of helped each other along the way. And then the rest was fun, but it was a lot of learning, a lot of ups and downs, and all you worried about was baseball then. You worried about yourself and staying prepared and ready, not knowing when you were going to get called up to the next level. So there was a lot of new things that were happening that I had no idea about.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said there about meeting Nick and that you became lifelong friends. I think that's something, especially as I've gotten older, I've realized. I look back at like some friends that came along at a certain important part of my life, professional life, and it was also happening for them because we were kind of a similar age, similar situation, and it doesn't matter how old you get or where you go, where everybody goes, you're always going to be linked together by this pretty amazing time in your life. So I love hearing that. Well, let's fast forward to 2012. You're making your debut against the Diamondbacks. First hit was the first hit that day. I know it was against Joe Saunders. Was it that day?
That day, yeah, my third at bat.
So what was that like? Getting called up, the debut, the whole deal.
So I got the call after a game on a Saturday night. It was May the 12th in Fresno, and so it's 1:30 here in Georgia. Obviously, my wife was there at the game. She was pregnant with our first daughter, Collins. My first call was to my dad, my mom and dad. So it's 1:30 in the morning in Georgia. Well, they're obviously super excited. I think they got on an 8 o'clock flight, so they bought tickets. It was my mom, my dad, my sister, her husband, and their oldest daughter at the time, Presley. She was 5, and Kendall, I think they had 2. And so they got all 5, 6 of them got on a flight to Arizona, and it was Mother's Day, May the 13th. So even better. My mom's there, my wife's there, pregnant with our first. I think I got an hour of sleep the night before, so obviously just running on fumes. I think it didn't really matter if you got a full night's rest or not. It's your debut. It was a day game. We won. I got to play the whole game at second. I actually didn't get a ground ball, which was wild.
The whole game.
The whole game. Barry Zito pitched for us. Didn't get a ground ball. I think I got a force out at second base, and we won. And so it was great to have my family there. They got on a flight back to Georgia right after the game, and then we flew to San Francisco after the game. And my coach, our hitting coach at the time, Hensley Mullins, they called him Bam Bam, took a picture of me. I was passed out. I was obviously super tired and just exhausted. And he said, "This is what you can remember and show people on your first show flight." But I was glad to have been a part of a win and to have gotten that first hit with my family in the stands on Mother's Day.
How appropriate that it was in Arizona too, where you first, like when you were going to that Days Inn a few years prior, going, what am I doing? How about that? That's cool.
I guess the beauty of baseball, you just never know when it's going to happen or what might lie ahead. But yeah, to have started my professional career there and then to have started my major league journey and my debut in Arizona, I guess it's pretty fitting.
Yeah, that's awesome. So come up with the Giants, and then you eventually you head over to the Rockies. You traded to the Rockies. What was that like getting traded for the first time?
Weird, because it's all I knew was the Giants for over 5 seasons, and now they're giving you up. So it's, trades happen all the time. They believe in you, but they also believe that you're worth something potentially to somebody else, and they got Marco Scudero in return, which in turn helped them. He was one of their best players through the rest of the season and through the postseason. He was NLCS MVP that year. They won the World Series. And so the trade worked out great for them. And when we got traded, we packed up my wife's Infiniti, and we had her little dog at the time. We drove almost 18 hours, almost straight, from Fresno to Colorado Springs. And so luckily I had played with a couple guys in the Rockies organization in the fall league 2 years prior. So they kind of made it a little bit easier for me, but it was definitely wild. I mean, to see guys get traded mid-season doesn't make it super easy. There's a lot of guys that were welcoming, and there was a couple guys that were a little intimidating. And so, you're a team, but you become close with a few guys, and that's just part of it. And those few guys made it easy for me, and the coaching staff was great there.
I've always, when I get a chance to talk to a current, former big leaguer, I like to ask about being traded and how that kind of goes, because I think as fans, and I'm a lifelong baseball fan, Braves fan, so I'm guilty of it, like most fans are. You get all hyped up on a hot stove and the trade deadline, and you're just thinking about the on the field part for your team, and we don't really think about the real life stuff that has to happen for these folks, especially as you said in the middle of the season, like packing up the family and the car and the dog and driving 18 hours from one state to another almost straight. I mean, I think it's great for folks to hear about, like, hey, here's the real world impact on the people
right.
that are being traded. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, they're more than just a pawn.
Yeah,
and that's what a lot of people think. They're just another person or another pawn that's just being added to a team or taken off the team, and that's part of the game. That's part of all sports and part of life, really, to be quite honest. But we made that trip over to Colorado Springs. Well, me and my wife get food poisoning like a few days into it.
Ugh.
She's pregnant. She's having to go to the hospital. She's admitted to the hospital. So those are other things that happen that, as a player, our job is to be ready and to perform at the highest level that we can. But on the other flip side, it's my wife's 7 months pregnant, and now she's in the hospital with food poisoning. I'm sick on the side too. Go back to the park the next day and start playing again when, you got family. Some of these guys have kids, and, trying to stay healthy is a big deal. And so there's a lot that goes on into it than, just to play on the field.
Just to branch off of that for just a second, how difficult is that when you're showing up, you have your job to do every day, you're showing up to the ballpark. How difficult is that to compartmentalize everything else, especially when things are, you mentioned that like your wife is sick in the hospital. Even for me, I'm not a professional ball player, but last year my wife was pregnant. She ended up in the hospital early with our daughter, and it's hard to like make sure I'm still doing my work and still showing up and doing what I need to do there, but to like block that out completely, even for me, just showing up to an office was tough. So how tough is that as a ball player to try to not think about that for those 3 or 4 hours that you're playing?
To keep it separate is almost impossible. Luckily, we were able to meet some very friendly people through family of my buddy Nick Noonan. He had family out there, which is kind of wild. And we met a very nice lady who lived close by. And I remember we got back to the extended stay that we were staying in for, the next month. She brought groceries and just left them at the front door for me and my wife. And just little things like that, that there are obviously good people out there, people that just want to help, that don't want recognition. It's from people like her, this lady that, did something nice for us and wanting nothing in return allowed me to be a little bit more comfortable at the park. Someone that we just met. They just wanted to make us, feel welcome, but also take care of us when we needed it. And so it's just the things like that kind of really make things work. And it kind of helped me be able to, take a deep breath and know that Sarah was fine and taken care of and doing better, and that I could, focus on preparing and playing.
As much as it pains me to do so, I do want to touch on the success you had with the Dodgers. Not because of you, because of the Dodgers. I'm just,
right. No,
just teasing.
I get it.
No, you had some amazing moments with the Dodgers. 2016, you hit a walk-off to clinch the NL West. And then 2017 postseason, obviously. I think everybody that's followed your career knows about that and what you did in the CS. But what was that time like with the Dodgers? Because I know you're still grinding, going back and forth, trying to stay up with the big leagues, but looking back at the highlights, man, you had some huge ones during those couple of seasons. So what was that Dodgers tenure like for you?
Yeah, it started out great, honestly, and I always go back to it. Corey Seager's a good friend of mine, and I always give Corey a lot of credit because Corey when he's healthy, he's one of the best players in baseball. The way that he goes about his business is just somewhat unmatched, especially the way he takes hitting. And he's a very good defender, but Corey just seemed, with being a big guy, 6'4", seemed to be hurt a lot. With him being so active in the box and making plays on the field, it allowed me as a non-roster guy to come in as somewhat of a nobody to start playing shortstop in spring training. And I was making plays, I was getting hits, I was a lot of doubles and a couple home runs in spring training. So here I am going to spring training with the Dodgers, not really having much expectations, but allow myself to be on the field and to play and to make a team. So I kind of made a name for myself early on with the help from Corey, allowed me to get some playing time at shortstop. And so having that extra time and then filling in for him when he wasn't playing for the few times I did that year, and then getting a chance to play the whole game that one day in late September to eventually, hit a walk-off. It was kind of wild against a former team in the Colorado Rockies. So that was extra special, honestly. Just a nice feeling, a good moment, perfect timing, obviously. And Corey actually hit a game-tying home run the inning before. So it's pretty cool how things come together and work out. I was pretty blessed to have had, parts of 2 seasons with the Dodgers, 2 postseasons, and a World Series appearance. And
hit a home run in the World Series too, right?
And a home run, yeah. And I kind of caught some grief and some heck for my home run because I came in the 11th, I believe it was, 10th or 11th. They hit 2 home runs. We were down 7-5. I come back up in the bottom half with 1 out and hit a home run. Well, I'm pretty bright guy. I know that there's no one on base. My home run doesn't tie it. It doesn't win it. But I hit a home run in the World Series from a guy who played all year in AAA. I came up the last day of the season, like September 3rd or 4th, because Seager was hurt again, and so they needed somebody to come play shortstop and be available as a backup. So I grinded through a whole AAA season, and then I'm playing in the World Series. My parents are in the stands, my wife, my kids. Had a lot of people in the stands, and I get a chance to hit a home run in the World Series, and kind of came around first base, and my arms out a little bit, kind of excited. I get a chance to come into a game, my first at bat, home run. And so there were some people, talking about me. It's like, oh, he thought he hit a walk-off. He didn't know the score of the game. I'm like, listen, here's a little kid that the little kid came out. And so I had a chance to, I think I was 3 for 5 in the World Series. And it allowed me with that postseason to show, other people that, I can do it, that I can be a part of a team that can show up and, perform when it matters. And then with Alex coming over here, kind of started my journey with the Braves.
Yeah. I think sometimes we get caught up in like, did he show him up, or what did he do, or he made this gesture and all that. And sometimes I get it on some levels, and then other times I think maybe it's just as simple as, one of my favorite baseball movies is Mr. Baseball with Tom Selleck, and or his character Jack Elliott says, baseball is a game, and games are supposed to be fun. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'm like, sometimes it can just be that simple. We don't have to overanalyze it. Like somebody has a big moment, it's okay.
Right.
So, yeah, you mentioned Alex, and so I remember I was working here at the time, and I believe that was Alex's first big transaction, was to make that trade that brought you over here. So what was that like, knowing that you were coming home to Georgia?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually a big money swap, right? It was Matt Kemp going back to the Dodgers for Brandon McCarthy, Adrian Gonzalez, Scott Kazmir.
It's a huge deal. There's a
big
lot of moving parts.
A lot of moving parts, a lot of money being swapped around. And then myself, I'm being thrown into this 4-for-1 trade. And when I got the call, it was crazy. We were living in Smyrna at the time, and they're like, hey, you're going to be traded. And getting traded is obviously crazy in itself, but then to hear that it was to the Atlanta Braves was pretty wild, to think that, we live 10 minutes away, getting a chance to potentially play for your hometown team. So, yeah, I told my wife, Sarah, I was like, you have to sit down for this. And so I told her, and so it was just kind of a whirlwind to, get traded again, but to not know what's going to happen, to not know if I was going to make the team or not, but obviously pretty grateful for, Alex's first trade as a GM here.
Well, it definitely, for Braves fans, it definitely paid dividends. And for you, this will be my 11th season working with the Braves, lifelong Braves fans. But so I've seen, or a lifelong Braves fan. So there's a lot of Braves memories that are stored in my brain up here over the last 40 years, a ton of them. But there's some that will always stick out. And late May, early June 2018, the birth of Charlie Clutch, let's call it, those 2 walk-offs that you hit within a week or so. I think it was within less than a week. Mm-hmm. Those are moments that, being at the ballpark, and I've been here for a zillion games now, worked a zillion games. Those are ones that stand out for me. And again, that was, I think, for Braves country, that was the birth of Charlie Clutch. That was the nickname. We ended up on T-shirts. I know people still refer to you as that. I still refer to you as that when we're just talking baseball with friends or whatever. So what was that time like for you? Those couple of walk-offs? Because there are moments, I think, in sports where guys become fan favorites for a team, and that you just etched as a fan favorite from that point on, no matter what happened. So what do you remember about that, and what was that time like for you?
Yeah, I think that was just pretty good timing. No, it was funny. I'll go back to a couple times where Jeffrey and Core came up to me, and he's like, hey, man, relax, you're good. Like, there's a lot of pressure, being a hometown kid and family and, wanting to make this work, really solidify yourself as a big leaguer, especially being back here. And then he came back and, said something to me in Philadelphia. He's like, dude, you're good. He went through it, obviously. First round pick by the Braves, got up quick and, was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. So, he kind of had it, but obviously, more than I did. He just kind of told me, you're fine. Just do your part. Just don't try to do too much. And then from that point on, I was able to kind of relax a little bit more. And so then May 28th comes back around, and it's kind of funny. I had 4 walk-off home runs and 3 of them were on family birthdays.
Really?
So Rockies one was on my wife's. May 28th was my mother-in-law's, and then June 3rd was her sister's. So yeah, the first day of that, excuse me, that home series, it was first game of a doubleheader against the Mets. And it's funny, you go back to it, it's like analytically, from that standpoint, Charlie probably shouldn't be hitting it against a right-hander, right? Against Seth Lugo as a closer. But that was fun because there was no DH. And so I really enjoyed the part of being a utility guy that could, be available to do anything, but you also have to play the game too. But I think I was the last guy off the bench. And, I wasn't supposed to get a hit or succeed because here's a righty facing a righty that's not a starter. But I did, and I was able to, put a good swing on a high slider, and, it worked out in our favor. And so that happened, and then that Sunday to end the homestand, I was able to come up with another pinch hit walk-off home run, and to be able to start a homestand and end it with 2 pinch hit walk-off home runs was pretty cool. And the next day, we had an off day in San Diego, so to be able to kind of let that sit in I think it was kind of cool to have that off day to kind of enjoy it, to enjoy a cross-country flight, to obviously get some text and calls from people that were there at the game, or just watching the game from home, just to allow me to know that they were super excited for me, and to see this journey and to kind of see it unfolding.
That whole season, that 2018 season for the Braves, was a really special season. That was kind of marked the beginning of this era that we're still in now, as you and I are sitting here talking in 2025. And so that, I know as a fan and as an employee at the time, what a fun ride that was. So I'm sure, I can't imagine what it was like for you guys on the field, because it was just a joyous trip that whole year. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about this. So this is kind of similar in that there are certain memories that are always going to stick out for me, working and being at the ballpark every day. A position player pitching is always going to stand out for me. Yours, I've seen a few now. I've been lucky as a hardcore baseball guy. I love being able to see that. But your first appearance in 2019 was the one. That's the one that always stands out to me, because you came out there and you didn't just pitch. I mean, we looked at you. I don't know if it was your first pitch, but I remember you threw a pitch and I looked up at the gun and it said 94. And we're in the press box all looking at each other going, holy, well, I mean, what we were saying? We're like, wow, this is crazy. And you went out there and I think mowed them down 1, 2, 3 from what I remember. So I want to know, first of all, had there been at SNIT or anybody ever said to you previously, like, hey, if we ever get into a laugher one way or the other or whatever, we need some, be ready. And then when you are told that, how do you mentally prepare yourself and physically prepare yourself in that moment to go do it? Did you warm up in the tunnel? How did that happen?
Yeah, so that was actually, I think it was August of 2018.
2018, okay. I'm sorry.
I did pitch again in 2019, maybe once or twice. But yeah, I was actually playing more that year. Being able to play more and be on the field, you're more ready. You're a little bit more athletic. You're playing in games. And so you're used to being out there, and my arm was always in good shape. But I always said that, whenever I had a chance to go in and pitch, I was going to try to throw it. But no, I wasn't throwing bullpens before. And that's something that I tried getting to where, teams, they're going to use a position player every now and then. You need to allow those guys to go and throw just to have the feel of it. Personally, I didn't want to go out there and throw 30 or 40 miles an hour and just lob the ball up there. I had more in it in my heart. And I feel like that was just kind of a slap on the face, honestly. So it was actually against the Rockies. I wish it was a 1-2-3 inning, because that was the only earned run I gave up as a position player pitching in the major leagues. Okay. And I gave up a double to a buddy of mine, Charlie Blackmon, and then another friend of mine, DJ LeMahieu, tried throwing a slider to him. It kind of backed up and spun over the plate, and he hit his, famous little base hit to right field and drove in Blackmon for the run. But yeah, the second pitch I threw was to Chris Iannetta, and it was 94, kind of up and away, and he kind of check swung. And it was funny because I've seen the video a few times, and he kind of throws his hands up, because as a position player, you don't want to face a position player, because it's honestly a lose-lose, especially if a guy's throwing it. trying to throw it. And, I took a lot of pride in that. I didn't want to just go out there and lollipop it. And so did I surprise myself? Maybe a little bit. But it was a lot of fun. And I always said, like, I was going to go out there and try to throw. And then I started, working on a few pitches, just playing catch, just to make sure, like, I don't want to just throw fastballs the whole time. And so just to have fun with it. But I also knew, too, that typically we were losing if I'm pitching. And I wanted to go out there and get 3 outs because I didn't want any guys in the bullpen to have to come up and, and get hot and throw. And what if they get hurt? Or what if they go out there and give up 2 or 3 runs? That's never fun to be losing 10-1 and then you go out and give up 2 or 3 runs. If a position player does it, so be it. As long as you can eat an inning and get through an inning, it helps your team, it helps your bullpen for the rest of the series and potentially, a week or 2 down the road. So, I wanted to make sure that I was actually giving effort and not making, kind of a mockery of the situation.
Yeah. There is in the video, maybe it's when he made the gesture at the plate, but the camera caught you kind of just making this little like, yeah, that's just what happened. That, and I don't know. I think if my memory serves correctly, I think the guys in our booth started laughing, and it was just such a perfect. Whoever was directing that night just caught all the right moments because it was great. But to be there, and I didn't see it till afterward because I was watching in person. But it was cool to see because I like watching pitching position players pitch. It's entertaining. But to me, I would rather see some guy come in and do what you did, and like there's real, like you're giving everything you got, and not the lollipop. Like it's kind of funny and all that, but I like the approach you had. That's why it still stands out to me above all the rest because of that. Because of you, I mean, you came out there. It's like this dude just came in, and if you hadn't told me he was a position player, I wouldn't have known. Like he'd throw 94. So that's why it stands out to me, and that's why I loved it. Yeah. Well, listen, Charlie, I've already kept you longer than I intended to, so it's a thank you for indulging me and us and coming all the way in here. And best of luck with the broadcasting career, and we hope to see you around the ballpark a lot this year.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun, and hope you invite me back to do it again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.